Welcome to Paranormal Nightshift, your ultimate destination for everything that lurks in the shadows and goes bump in the dark. This is where your fan-submitted stories come to life, told right here on the Nightshift. Before we dive into today's story, we've got a special treat for you. Head over to paranormalnightshift.com to claim your free copy of The Birth of Dimensional Desperado, the first ebook in the thrilling Dimensional Desperado series. Discover the origin story of Buck Shadow Sheriff Freeman and his ghost-flamed belt, setting him on a wild journey through time and the paranormal. Now, on to today's chilling tale. This one comes from Melissa, and she calls it The Anchor. So grab your flashlight, settle in, and prepare to be transported into the eerie unknown. Let's begin. It was late October when I had one of the most profound experiences of my life, a moment so powerful and unexplainable that even now, thinking back to it, gives me chills. I've always loved Halloween, the season of ghosts and spirits, when the air seems to thicken with mystery and possibility. When my husband and I bought our forever home in 2019, it felt like all of those things that had intrigued me my entire life had come together into a dream come true. The house was over 2 centuries old, with a rich, layered history embedded in every wall and floorboard. Only one family had lived there before us, a family tied deeply to the land and to history itself. The story went that President Andrew Jackson had gifted this land, 30 acres in total, as a reward for their assistance in the War of 1812. And somewhere across the road, hidden in a cluster of trees in the middle of a cotton field, was the family's own graveyard. Tons of graves, marked and unmarked, some old enough that the names had faded, containing everything from elderly family members to infants who never saw their first birthday. When I heard this, my excitement was boundless. I thought, if ever there were a place with an aura, a touch of the other side, this would be it. But, much to my disappointment, it quickly became clear that our beautiful old house wasn't haunted. Not a creak, not a shadow, not a single cold spot that couldn't be explained by drafty windows. We spent night after night there, settling into the quiet comfort of the home, but that sense of mystery I'd expected was nowhere to be found. I couldn't help but feel a bit let down, as strange as that might sound. Then, fast forward a few years. My husband, who had always been a kind and deeply respectful man, began working at a funeral home as a cremation specialist. He took great pride in his work, finding solace and even a sort of honor in helping families during one of their most difficult times. In his job, part of the process after cremation involved sorting through the ashes, removing any metal fragments or foreign objects left behind. One evening, he came home with a small object cradled in his hand, wrapped in a cloth. He looked at me, eyes lit up with that spark he gets when he finds something he knows I'd find fascinating. He held out his hand, unwrapping the cloth to reveal a tiny metal anchor. "This was in the ashes of a Navy veteran," he said softly. "I thought you'd want to see it." I took the anchor in my hand, expecting nothing more than to admire this little memento of a life that had meant so much to so many. But as soon as my fingers curled around that tiny anchor, a feeling hit me, like an emotional tidal wave crashing over my entire being. It wasn't just sadness. It was a deep, aching sorrow that seemed to seep into my very bones. My heart felt heavy, a weight that I couldn't shake off, and before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face. I tried to hold it back, but the tears kept coming, uncontrollable and relentless. My husband's face grew pale as he watched me, concern filling his eyes. He put his hand on my shoulder, asking, "What's wrong?" Are you okay?" I couldn't find the words to explain it at first, but the feeling was so strong, so visceral, that I couldn't ignore it. It was as if I could feel this man's soul, his heartache, his longing. Through my tears, I asked, Did he have a big family? Grandkids?" My husband nodded slowly, still watching me, unsure of where I was going with this. "Yes," he replied. "They said his family was large. Why?" I could barely hold myself together. The sorrow I felt was almost like my own, like a part of me was grieving someone I had never even met. "He wasn't ready to go," I said quietly. "He was so sad, mourning his family, his grandkids. He didn't want to leave them." My husband's brow furrowed, and he looked at me with a mix of awe and confusion. "How do you know that?" I didn't know how to answer him. I had no explanation, no reason for how I knew this man's deepest emotions, but I felt it in my soul. It was like the anchor had somehow opened a doorway, letting me feel the last remnants of a spirit that wasn't quite ready to move on, a spirit that had left behind this tiny symbol of who he was. Then, as quickly as it had come, the sadness lifted. I handed the anchor back to my husband, and the moment it left my hand, the weight in my chest vanished, leaving me drained, but strangely at peace. I wiped my tears, trying to regain my composure as I looked at him, and he studied the anchor with newfound reverence. Curiosity getting the better of me, I asked if I could hold it again. But this time, when my fingers wrapped around the cool metal, there was nothing, just a tiny anchor, no different from any other object. Whatever connection I had felt, whatever message or emotion had surged through me, was gone, leaving only the small piece of metal behind. Even though that moment was fleeting, I keep that anchor in a safe place to this day. It serves as a reminder of that extraordinary experience, a reminder of that brief, profound connection to someone who had crossed over, but, for just a heartbeat, seemed to reach back. And as strange as it sounds, the experience was almost comforting. I'd spent so long yearning for some touch of the paranormal, something unexplained and magical, and it had finally happened, not in my old history-laden home, but through a simple act of kindness, through a gesture from a stranger who had lived a full, meaningful life. It was one of the most powerful and inexplicable moments of my life, and though I may never fully understand it, I'll always feel grateful for it. With that being said, Melissa, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been an incredible journey. If you've enjoyed this episode, there are so many ways to support the show and keep the adventures going. First, consider joining us on Patreon for an ad-free experience and exclusive access to all future journeys of the Dimensional Desperado. Don't want to join Patreon? No problem. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and YouTube. While you're there, leave us a comment and let us know what you thought about this episode. We love hearing from you. And here's something special for all our listeners. Head over to paranormalnightshift.com to grab your free copy of the first ebook in the Dimensional Desperado series, The Birth of Dimensional Desperado. It's our gift to you for being part of this amazing community. Finally, if you have a story you'd like to submit, we'd love to hear it. You can share it with us right here on Paranormal Nightshift. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next adventure.